Hi everybody, I'm coming at you live from the laundry today. I don't do many chats out here, but that's where we are this morning on this fine sunny day where I live. So one of the most common questions I get asked whenever I mention my hobby, the Boer War, and I have other hobbies, the Beatles, various colonial wars, World War One, the Red Indians, Aussie rules football, gardening, cooking. But yeah, I've got a passion for the Boer War. I was interviewed by Rachel's Ghost, the TV show on YouTube, Canadian, and that was the first question I wanted to know was, why the Boer War? So we need to mention the elephant in the room, which I very rarely mention in any of my videos. I do occasionally say those bloody Boers, always with a bit of a smile on my face. So it's the Afrikaner, my relationship with the Afrikaners. Now, in 1971, we migrated to South Africa. Dad got a job over there, and we landed up in Brakpan, which was the Transvaal back then, and it was real heavy-duty, deep-seated conservative Afrikanerdom. And I'm a stubborn sort of person. When you tell me to do something and you beat me and you punish me and you push me into doing something, I tend to dig my feet in. So I never learned Afrikaans. Having said that, I found a report card from Brakpan High, sort of at some stage, maybe in the last exam I took, where I actually got 30%, I think, around 30% Afrikaans as a score in one of the exams, which was another reason why I had to sort of come back to Australia, or wanted to come back to Australia, was I was going to start getting failed at school because I couldn't speak Afrikaans. So when I went back last year, even Brian said, my mate, you know, you could pick up Afrikaans if you were here for a while. I think I could now. I understood about a quarter of what people were saying. Afrikaans was, surprisingly for me, was spoken everywhere. There's very little English spoken in most of those places I went to, apart from the friends that I had who, you know, were English speaking. So there's that. So yeah, when we got there, it was a real culture shock. It was, you know, apartheid was at its peak. We didn't know the local customs or the ways and the language and all that. So we were bumbling our way along, and of course I was coming from liberal Australia, where I grew my hair long. I liked, you know, rock music, Aussie bands, and none of that was available in South Africa, you know. It was a very militaristic society back in those days. No television, and you know, I found that really hard to adjust to, but one of the biggest adjustments was getting my hair cut. Absolutely hated having my hair cut the style that the school was insisting upon. So there was turmoil. I look back now and I think they were only doing their job as a school, and actually there were some good things happened at Brakpan High, which we're going to get onto, which relate to the Boer War, right? But yeah, that's, and of course Mum died within 6 months of me getting there, so I was filled with bitterness, pain, confusion, homesickness. You know, initially Dad said, well, we'll go back to Australia, and then the time dragged on. In the end, I was there about 5 years, nearly 6 years before I got back to Australia. And in that time, I had many run-ins with the Afrikaners. I viewed them as real conservative, backward type people. So I've got to say up front, my views have changed considerably on the Afrikaners. They're the descendants of the Boers. I've got a great admiration for them now. I'm not going to say I particularly like them, but there would be some Afrikaners, of course, that you know, I get on and are really nice people. But we didn't meet many of them when we were in Brakpan. Even the schools, we went to Brakpan High, which was English speaking, and even their schools, we were always clashing, having punch-ons with, the Afrikaner schools. South Africa was a funny place. It probably still is, in so far as there's so many different cultures and races all clashing, all fighting at the same time. So it wasn't just the Afrikaners and the black people, the Afrikaners and the British, or the English speaking. I mean, we were called Roynecks. The Boer War had hardly finished, it seemed like, when we were there. And in fact, there would have been Boer War veterans around, and I didn't know. So 1971, there were still people or men in South Africa that had fought as Boers in the Boer War. So, that clears that up. I have a great admiration for how they've protected their culture, how they've fought hard to maintain their culture, their language, their beliefs and all that sort of thing, as best as they can in the new South Africa. And it's going to be hard for them, but one thing we know about them is they're tough, and that's why I admire them also in the Boer War. So that leads us on to point two, why the Boer War, because to me they were so incredible as though I liken them to the anti-vaxxers of the day. Now I got vaccinated, and I went along with the government line on COVID and vaccination, and I've got no problem with that. Everyone I know got vaccinated, but I know there were people that stood up and said it was a government conspiracy. They protested, they fought with police. So to my mind, the Boer at the time wasn't going to go along with the government's line. Well, so their government stood up to the British and said, no, you're not going to do this. This is not going to happen. But you were standing up to the might of the British Empire, which is the biggest empire ever known. And they must have known that the forces that would be brought to bear on them would be overwhelming. But they had a belief in themselves, and God, no doubt, that they'd already beaten the British in the First Boer War, and on a number of occasions they'd put the British back in their place. So they believed that they could prevail, I suppose, and maintain their independence. So I don't know if you can see that that view in my head of standing up to power greater than yourself. I've always liked underdogs. I've always admired an underdog, someone that will stand up and fight no matter the odds. So there's that about them. And as I've said to many people, it's just a cracking story. The story of the Boer War is just a cracking story. To have Canada, Australia, India, Britain, Ireland, all those nations involved in, on the British side, and then to have all those other nations involved supporting the Boers, independent Irish and Americans and Germans, and so I find that fascinating. It was supposed to be very lopsided, but in the end it wasn't, so I find that really interesting. So back to Brakpan. So I think in about 1973, and my friend that I stayed with, Jackie, she kind of remembered it. She was on the tour with us. The school took us on this bus trip, right? I think it was about 1973, and Jackie must have been in my class. David Goff came on the trip as well, and I interviewed him a couple of years ago. So they took us on the school trip on a bus. And now last year when I was in South Africa, I made a point of going to some of the places we went to on that bus trip. They were Zulu War related. We went to Blood River, and we went to Jinjinshlovu, Dingaan's Corral, right? But we went to other places as well on that bus trip. But on the way, and I've mentioned this to others, on the way we saw a blockhouse, and the bus pulled over, and the teacher said, there's a Boer War blockhouse over there. So we were all looking over, and it just did something to me. And I wanted to get off that bus and go and run over and explore the blockhouse, but we weren't allowed off the bus But that was the first time I can remember getting really excited about seeing Boer War kind of infrastructure or archaeological sites, or and that was one of the best days ever on my holiday, was getting to climb inside a blockhouse. I forgot about that when I did my top 10 places I saw, but I went inside a blockhouse in South Africa. Fantastic. So yeah, there's that. So I've got to thank Brakpan High for developing that interest in history in me. I already had it, because I remember when we got to South Africa and we started at school, I was fascinated with the teacher telling us about the Boer Wars, Xhosa, down on the Cape. There was about 12 or 15 what they called Boer Wars, which were frontier wars where the Africans were hitting the migrants and the farmers and the Dutch, and then later on the British would come along and sort of attack the coursers and put them back in their place. And so that fascinated me, the idea of spears and shields against muskets. So anyway, so at some stage, and I think it was about 73, we went to live with this Afrikaner woman, June, lived in Derby Avenue in Brakpan. What a witch. That woman was a real psychological psycho, a child abuser. She hated me with a vengeance because I wouldn't call her auntie because I didn't speak Afrikaans, and but mainly because I was between her and my dad. She wanted in on my dad. So yeah, the stuff she did to me, she killed one of my pets. I believe, I've got no proof, but I believe she killed one of my pets. But anyway, yeah, she was a real psycho. But one thing that happened, and I don't know if she gave me the book, but there was a book I read around that time, and I can't for the life of me remember what it's called, but it was something about dust and khaki or something like that. And I think it was fiction. They told the story of a British officer who was maybe in a relationship with a Boer woman or something like that. I don't know, but it was really well written. You see, I was a prodigious reader from an early age, and around that time I was reading a hell of a lot of paperbacks on the Indian Wars in America, the Apache and the Sioux Wars and the Comanche and all those. So that book had a big impact on me, the Boer War, and then I came back to Australia, and it never really left me, So I've just recently got this big magnificent print framed. I just took it in yesterday actually to get framed in Bendigo, and I'll show you guys when I get it framed. But that started back in, well, the other prints I've got in there and the stuff that I've got in the Africa room started in the 90s. I think it was early 90s. Yeah, I was buying military stuff, and I bought all these Boer War books that were written at the time. There's a whole series of them by a guy, I think his name's Louis Creswick or something. There's about 6 volumes of just the war in the Transvaal, and they were written at the time, but they're very complex, they're very deep. I've never actually read them, but they're real detailed with maps and illustrations and all that of the time. So I was buying Boer War stuff way back. I was always into it, looking for war games that had a Boer War theme. But yeah, as I said, but also the Indian Mutiny was another one that interested me. The Zulu Wars interested me, and all that stuff. But yeah, the Boer War has been a constant in my life, for over 50 years now. So why do I like the Boer War? I have an admiration, a love-hate for the Afrikaner. It's a story of an underdog. It's a cracking story of an underdog standing up to authority and might. It has a personal touch because of the things I saw as a kid, because of living amongst the the Afrikaners at the time when the Boer War wasn't that old, and also being Australian and knowing that the Australians were involved and fought in the Boer War was a big one. Yeah, it's just one of those things that I love to research, read about, and look into. So, in a long-winded way, that's why I'm into the Boer War. Okay, bye.